Hello, everyone, and happy Advent 2025. I'm joined by my co-founder, Father Robert Sirico, and we're reminiscing about 2025, but more than that, 35 years of great Acton work. It's our 35th anniversary. So, Father, I don't know what your initial reflections are when you think back of 35 years of Acton, but what comes to mind?
You know, there's that old, everybody says it, it went so fast. It really did. I mean, I remember picking you up at the airport here in Grand Rapids in, I think it was January or February.
April 8th, 1990.
Was it? Because it was very cold.
Yes. No, I had shorts, a T-shirt, probably the last tan of my life.
Yes.
And it was snowing.
And I was wearing a long black coat. And in those days, you could just park, and I ran in and got you. And I said, I looked at you and I said, why did you take my coat? Because it was so cold.
I had wondered for a moment what I had done with my life. But Grand Rapids was beautiful, and it's absolutely grown on me, and what a marvelous place to build this institution.
It really was perfect. It was providence that we should be here. It's a great community. We're out of the insanity of the Beltway and the coasts, and it's you know, a great civic and philanthropic and faith-filled community.
Speaking of the insanity of the coasts, I was asked even today why we chose Grand Rapids, and that was my immediate impression, or my immediate reflection was that we don't want to be responding to every sort of thing that comes out of Washington, D.C. in the mouths of politicians.
Well, we've always said that over the years because, you know, having both of us lived in the Beltway in that area for our education. And I could imagine if we were there every night, there'd be 2 or 3 cocktail parties. I know some people who never bought food. They would just schedule themselves to go to dinner parties and cocktail parties and receptions and things like that. And we'd just be responding to whatever belch comes out of the federal government. Right. And here we have the opportunity to just kind of serenely reflect on things. So when there are belches, we see how enduring they are, whether they're really significant or just a personality conflict of one thing or another. And we see that happening right now. There are so many divisions even in our sector of the, what would we call it, the freedom community. Right. A lot of divisions, and I think a lot of it is coming out of, well, the technology that's promoting it, but also a lack of deep, principled reflection, and it's very unfortunate.
You're right, and I want to hold that thought and come back to it. It's really important. But that's something that's changed, I think, over 35 years.
Yes.
If you remember, when we began Acton, the assumption on the part of the people we were working with, religious leaders, for example, was one of socialism. Mm-hmm. And so our enemies, as it were people for sure on the left. And if you remember the religious bodies that represented religious people, National Council of Churches, USCCB, the U.S. Bishops, World Council of Churches, they were coming out on a regular basis with statements that condemned in a variety of different ways, free markets, limited government, etc. And so our mission was pretty clear, that we were trying to help the religious community understand the normative good of business, the context of freedom, that business, in which business can survive, etc. A lot of that has changed. Yeah. And now, you know, jumping forward 35 years, you're talking about the divisions on the right. Many of the people that we're working with, even in religious communities, young priests or ministers, are more conservative than we are, in a sense. And they're giving short shrift to free markets and individual liberty and free and limited government.
Or put another way, they are animated by the use of the mechanisms of the state. And in that sense, they're mirroring the left. They just want to bring it to a different end, they say. But where power corrupts or tends to corrupt, it corrupts absolutely on both sides of the spectrum. Whereas we, and I think our geography, but also just kind of the philosophy, that we've adhered to over the years is more reflective and principled. We want to think in terms of principle and reason rather than personality and emotion.
Right, and I think it's true that the rancor, both on the national level in ideas and also within the right, the freedom community, as you stated earlier, has become much more divisive and ugly.
Right, and I think, people can criticize us because we're not in the boxing ring with them, and that should not be taken as a disinterest in the issues that are being debated, but in a reflection and our desire to address the core issues, the reasoned issues, the factual stuff, rather than the personalities. And we've never really been driven by algorithms and counting, how many hits a thing gets. Our confidence is in the veracity of the ideas and putting them forth and trusting that in itself will endure, even if at a given moment they can be discarded and demeaned.
I think that's right, and I think one of the distinctives about Acton, as you're suggesting, is this focus on principles and a long-term vision. And finally, what I've been thinking about a lot lately is our desire to win people. We don't want cheap victories. We really want to transform people's thinkings and their lives. And it sounds a little bit hyperbolic, but we see it every year. Our programs do change lives. People come to us afterwards, and I want to thank all of you who are part of this good work. But Acton's work, with the help of our supporters, is literally changing lives. And every year we have people come out of our programs and say, I see the world very differently.
Yeah. Somebody once said, to silence a person is not to persuade them. And what we seek to do is not shut somebody up, deplatform them, as is said now, but to persuade, to put arguments and to do it in a winsome way. That's not my natural default position because I'm from New York and I love a good fight, But the better angels of my nature say, be winsome, get to know people, show them the whole of your vocation, the whole of who you are as a person, as a Christian, and help to persuade from that perspective.
Father, I wonder if you couldn't use the season here to reflect on how Acton's principled view of the person can help bring about some peace in the season of rancor among people, not just on the right, but across the political spectrum.
Well, yes, and we do that. We bring about peace and harmony, not by ignoring the division and the variations that exist. I mean, when Christ comes into the world, it was a politically conflicted world. I mean, remember, he comes to a colony of Rome, a byway, and chooses to enter the vulnerability of the human condition in all of its individuality, which is both ethnic, especially in that place at that time, and political. And what he does in the midst of that confusion is allow a light to shine. And that light naturally attracts human beings because we all seek illumination in one way or another. The mind is built to apprehend the truth. So we use the image of light as a way of seeing, and reason as a way of seeing. And that Christ comes into the midst of that kind of circumstance to reveal the love of God, tells us something about, what we're really called to be. Again, the phrase, the better angels of our nature, to transcend the ease of insulting people, the ease of going to war with people or threatening people or manipulating people, but to recognize that each human being we encounter bears the image of Almighty God. I think in one of the texts in the Old Testament, it says that we have eternity inscribed in our hearts. And it's hard to remember that when you're having a disagreement with someone, especially if it's a disagreeable disagreement, that person too is made in the image and likeness of God. But if you can remember that in the midst of the heat and the blood pressure, it affords us the opportunity to build a more convivial and respectful conversation.
I'd like to think that another distinctive with Acton in the midst of groups doing our kind of educational work is that we start from these foundational premises of faith, that we look to people, our neighbor, our enemies with love as a commandment, and that has to impact the way we engage with people, a certain kind of respect. It's an understanding and appreciating human dignity and our anthropology, especially as expressed in Christianity, is another way of demanding our freedom as well.
Yeah.
So Acton's work, both to promote freedom, is not just for its utility, that it works, brings about prosperity, which of course we've seen, but because it's right and true.
Yes.
And natural to our creation.
Yeah, I think that's a very important, critical point. And I'm just imagining somebody caught up in the Beltway mentality, which doesn't have to just exist in the Beltway, can now, with the ease of communication, that can inflict people wherever they are. I can imagine such people infected with that, thinking this conversation, oh, that's just so boomer, that's just so old-fashioned, it's so boring, it doesn't have any energy to it. I want to suggest, especially in a period of time where we're asked to, quiet down and meditate a little bit, I want to ask such people to, especially young men in this culture, to sit and reflect on how content are you as a man, how content are you as a human being? And isn't it the truth of things that really is electric, that is electrifying, and that animates the soul and becomes the fusion that gives energy to our work, and to be able to reflect on our work with a sense of dignity and rightness? I think this other way of approaching it, which is so consumed with headlines and responsive to provocations or algorithms and things like that, ultimately, while exciting for a while, like a good shot of adrenaline or a drug, eventually leaves a kind of moral and intellectual hangover.
I agree. And I think we're already discovering that there's kind of a burnout, like a flame that quickly burns with all that passion and energy, and what do you have left? Whereas our steady course, principled course of seeing people and winning them over to our ideas is what will work in the long run.
Because then they build communities, they build businesses, they raise families, they create a current that can transform a culture and make it a culture that's worthy of the human person.
It is Christmas, a time of thanksgiving and reflection, and I certainly think of deep gratitude for the people over the many, many years who have helped make our work possible, which is many of you watching this today. So I want to close this by assuring you of our gratitude and prayers for the many ways you've supported our work, through your own prayers, through your financial contributions, through pointing good people to our programs. We're grateful for all of that.
We sure are, and we pray God's blessing and peace upon your homes in this holy season, no matter where you are in the world, because we're very aware that we have a very diverse audience, both intellectually and geographically.
Merry Christmas.
God bless.